Hello and welcome to this video on percentages. The idea for this video is to try and go through how we'd work out a certain percentage of a number, maybe look at how we would calculate the new price of something if it was in the sale, or maybe then do reverse percentages and look at what the original price would have been if we find something in the sale. So let's first look at how we'd form a percentage. So let's say I have a number which is let's say 200 for now. Okay, so I have 200 and I want to find what is 10% of 200. Okay, in order to do this, I know that 100% of this number is the number 200 and 10% is going to be some number that's less than 200. Now, to get from 100 to 10, I can divide by 10, which means if I do the same thing on the other side, it will give me 20, and therefore 10% of 200 is equal to 20. We could go further, we could find what is 5%, and that would just be dividing this by 2, and that would give you 10, so 5% is 10. We could even find what 2.5% is. By dividing by 2 again, and we can divide by 2 on this side, and 2.5% is 5, not percent, 2.5% is 5. We could find out what is 1% by dividing by 2.5 on both sides, and it would give me that 1% is 2. Now, you could have also said that if I have 100% and you want 1%, you can just divide by 100, which if we'd have done in this case, 200 divided by 100 does actually give you 2. So there's a multitude of ways that we can get to the same percentage. It's very common in these questions that they'll usually choose percentages in a non-calculator paper that you can get to using this method, and in calculator papers they might choose some more complicated percentages. In a non-calculator paper, the most complicated it's probably going to get is about 17.5%. So if I get rid of this stuff over here really quickly, we can now look at how would we find 17.5% of, let's go with 60, 17.5% of 60. And this is usually a VAT type question. So we'll say that the price of something is £60 plus VAT. How much is the total price of something, or something like that? So what we would do is we'd say that 100% is equal to 60. And then we'd find what is 10%. Well, that's going to be, we're dividing by 10 on both sides. So that's going to be 6. Then we'd find what is 5%. So we divide by 2 on both sides, and that becomes 3. And then we'd find what is 2.5%. So we're going to divide by 2 on both sides, and that becomes 1.5. Now we want 17.5. Okay, so we want 17.5. So we need to find what numbers are we going to add together in order to get 17.5. And if I do 10 plus 5 plus 2.5, if I cut off this 100% up here and I just add these 3 together, I get 17.5%, which means on the other side, if I add 6 plus 3 plus 1.5, I get 10.5, and therefore 17.5% is £10.50 in this case, if these were both values of money. And in that case, if we wanted the full price would be the 60 plus the £10.50. So it would be £70.50. So this is how we would do it in a non-calculator paper. If we were going to do it in a calculator paper, we can introduce the idea of having a multiplier. In a multiplier, if we wanted to say, look for a sale price, and we're saying that there's a sale, the original price of this thing is £250, is the original price of this games console, for example. And in the sale, this games console has a deal that is 20% off. And the question might ask you, how much does this thing cost in the sale? Well, we could do this a non-calculator way. If we did it a non-calculator way, we would say that we're trying to find what 20% is. So to get from 100% to 20%, we can just divide by 5, which means on the other side, 250 divided by 5 is just going to give you 50. These are both in pounds. And so if it's 20% off, then our total price is going to be 250 minus that £50. And so we're going to get a price of £200 in the sale. Now, this would be a non-calculator way, is completely correct. You wouldn't even have to go divided by 5 straight away. You could divide it by 10 and then times by 2 if you wish to get to 10% and then 20%. But when we have calculator papers, we can make it a little bit easier by just working out what the multiplier is. And in order to do that, we have to just know what percentage are we going to be left over with at the end of this sale. So if we're originally starting with 100% and we're minusing 20%, we're going to end up with 80%. So what we're actually trying to work out is what is 80% of 250. And the way we'd do that is we'd see that 80% per 100, because cent is 100, we get centuries with 100 years. And if I did 80 divided by 100, I'd get 0.8. This is now my multiplier. If I wanted to find 80% of any number, I just have to multiply it by 0.8. So in this case, if I take 250 and times it by 0.8, I will indeed get £200, which is exactly what we got in the other way. So we could do loads of practice with these kinds of numbers. We could have maybe a 20% increase, for example, or a 25% increase. So let's say there was a 25% increase on a, let's move down here a little bit. So let's say there was a 25% increase on something that costs £50. Okay, and we'd say what we actually want to find out is the 125% of £50. We could write this as 125 per 100, which would be 1.25. And so in order to find out what the increase price would be, it would be 50 times 1.25. And then we could type that into a calculator and see that this would be £62.50. And that would be your calculator way of working this out. So now, what would happen if we were to look at reverse percentages? Okay, so let's say we've been told that in this sale there was originally 15% off the price of a dress, and the dress now costs, so the sale price is now £70. Okay, and they might ask, what was the original cost? What was the original cost? So what we know is if we originally started with 100% of this value, then once we've taken the 15% off, we're left with 85%, and that's what the sale price is. So the sale price is actually 85% of the original price. And our job is to try and figure out what is 100% if this is 85%. And the way we're going to do that is to find what 1% is by dividing this by 85 and also dividing this by 85. and 70 divided by 85 gives you, I'll leave this as a fraction for now, it gives you 14 over 17. Leave it as a fraction for now because it's quite a long decimal, which we'll round at the very end to make sure we get an accurate result. So to get from 1% to 100, we can just times by 100. Same on the other side, times that by 100, we end up with 1,400 over 17. And this actually is equal, when we times this by 100, to £82 and 35 pence. And with that, we're able to calculate any original percent. So in this case, we've gone from 85 to 100. We could have just as easily gone from maybe 70% to 100% by just doing the divided by 70 to get 1%. These are both percentages, and then times by 100 to get 100%. And what you'll find is you'll always be dividing by the sale price and times by 100. And if we brought these together, we could always just say we could do this in one step, and instead of dividing by 70 and timesing by 100, you could just multiply by 100 over 70. Okay, and in this case, if we'd have done that, we would have had 70 multiplied by 100 divided by 85, which would have given us £82.35. Exactly the same answer. Okay, so this is how we're working out percentages and reverse percentages. So this first question, Wayne bought an engagement ring for Tracy. The total cost of the ring was £420 plus VAT at 17.5%. Work out the total cost of the ring. Okay, so we first need to work out what is 17% of 420. So when this VAT, value added tax, is something that's added to everything, and so in this case we have to work out what is 17.5% of 420 and then add it on to that £420. Okay, so in order to work out 17.5%, let's say we know 100% is £420, then we might want to work out what's 10% by dividing by 10 on both sides. So that's going to be equal to £42. Then we might want to know what is 5% by dividing by 2 on both sides. So 5% would be £21. And then we might want to know what is 2.5% by dividing by 2 on both sides. And half of this is going to be £10.50. And so if we wanted 17.5, we said in the revision video that we'd add the 10 plus the 5 plus the 2.5, and that's going to give you 17.5% on this side. And so then we have to add the 42 plus the 21, which is going to give us 63, plus the £10.50, which is £73.50. is the value added tax. So the total cost of the ring is going to be the initial 420 plus the £73.50, which is going to give you £493.50, and that would be your answer to this question. Okay, now Wayne invited 96 people to an engagement party. Only 60 of the people invited came to the party. Express 60 as a percentage of 96. So in order to write anything as a percentage, we need to know the amount that we have. In this case, we have 60 over the total amount. In this case, is 96, and we times that by 100. And then 60 over 96, if this is a non-calculator paper, you'd be able to simplify down a little bit. So we could divide top and bottom by 3, which is going to give you 20 over 32. And then we could divide top and bottom by 2, which is going to give you 10 over 16. And then we can divide by 2 again and give you 5 over 8, and then times that by 100, is going to be 500 divided by 8, but really you could just put this expression into a calculator and say 60 over 96 times by 100 is equal to 62.5%. And that would be your answer for this question. Okay, so now let's have a look at this question. So Bytes is a shop that sells computers and digital cameras. In 2003, Bytes sold 620 computers. In 2004, Bytes sold 708 computers. Work out the percentage increase in the number of computers sold and give your answer to an appropriate degree of accuracy. Okay, so if we're trying to work out a percentage increase, we first need to work out what is the actual numerical increase. So what's the difference between 708 and 620? We could do this and then put that over 620 and work out that percentage increase that way. Or you could just say that you have 708, which is your initial, over the total from the last year, which was 620, times that by 100, and that's going to give you 708 divided by 620 and divided by, times by 100 gives you 114.1935, so on. It's not to an appropriate degree of accuracy yet. We want to always do that last. But what this means is that this 708 is 114% of 620, meaning that this is actually only a 14.1935 so on percent increase. And to an appropriate degree of accuracy, we want to see that these are to 3 significant figures. So we want to make this to 3 significant figures. So we're going to say this was a 14.2% increase to 3 significant figures. And that would be your answer for this question. So now let's have a go at some reverse percentages. So in a sale, normal prices are reduced by 20%. Andrew bought a saddle for his horse in the sale. The sale price of the saddle was £220. Calculate the normal price of the saddle. So what we've said before is if our price was originally 100% and we're losing 20% of that, then the price that we're looking at here, this £220, is actually only 80% of the original price. And we want to know what is 100% of the original price. So what we're going to do is divide by 80 to find what 1% is, and then times that by 100 to find what 100% is. So if we divide this by 80, if we do 220 divided by 80, that gives us £2.75, and then timesing that by 100 means we get £275. And so the normal price of this is that £275. We could have, if there was a calculator, so we'll put a little aside in here. So if this is a calculator question, we could have just said that in order to work out this, we could do 220 times by 100 over 80, and that would have given you 275 as well. Okay, and finally, this is quite a long question, so quite a challenging question. So on Saturday, some adults and some children were in a theatre. The ratio of adults to the number of children was 5 to 2, so we'll write that here. So adults to children, there are 5 adults for every 2 children. Each person had a seat either in the circle or in the stalls, which I'm just going to note as this circle and this square. Okay. Then 3/4 of the children had seats in the stalls. So 3/4 of the children were over here. And it says that 117 children were in the circle. And there were exactly 2,600 seats to be filled. And the question is, were there more than 60% of the seats filled on this Saturday? Okay. So the trick with these questions is usually to work your way backwards through the information they've given you. So the thing that we could work out from to start with is if we've got 117 children in the circle and 3/4 of the children are in the stalls, that must mean that what's left over, this 117, is 1/4 of all the children. Since we know all of the children have to be placed either in the stalls or in the circle, and if we have 117 here and 3/4 of them are over there, this must be the remaining quarter that tells us how many children there are. Therefore, we can work out from this, if we know this is 1/4 of all the children, to get the total amount of all the children, we just have to multiply this by 4. So 117 times 4 to get the total amount gives us 468 children. Now we can work out the number of adults as well, since we have this ratio up here. And this ratio is saying that for every 2 children that we have 5 adults. So if this 468 is the total amount of children, it means that 468 is 2 parts of this ratio. Okay, and to work out the total amount of adults, we can work out what is 5 parts of that ratio. Or we don't have to specifically know how many adults there are, we just have to know how many people there are in total. So we could just say that in total we have 7 parts to this. And we could simply work out what is all the 7 parts, and then that tells us the total amount of people that were filling those seats. So if this is 2 parts, then we can divide it by 2 to find what 1 part is. And then once we've got that, we can then times that by 7 to find out what 7 parts is. Okay, so 468 divided by 2 is going to give 234. And then timesing that by 7 is going to give 1,638 people. So there are 1,638 people, and there are 2,600 seats. And we want to know, are there more than 60% of the seats filled? So if we work out what is this as a percentage of 2,600, it's 1,638 over 2,600 times by 100, and then we can put that into a calculator. So 1,638 over 2,600, and then times that whole thing by 100, and that gives you 63% of the total amount of people. And so our answer to this question, remember, we haven't finished yet. The question is, were there people on more than 60% of the seats? The answer is yes. 63% of the seats were filled, or were full. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this percentage video. Thank you for watching.